Hey, folks, we're about to get started, so please find a seat.
Yeah. I can just leave it on the best side. Yeah, thank you.
So, welcome everyone to Writing About, With, and Through AIDS, our second World AIDS Day event on the day after World AIDS Day. It continues. And I also wanted to mention that this is the Publishing Triangle's Outspoken Series December edition. So we're doing double duty here. So welcome, my name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder along with my partner, Donnie Jokum of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. We're being helped today by the lovely Bonita Kuevi, who is now very famous. And you'll be deeply missed. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room. As always, we are asking for donations. So we always say, give what you can if you can, and there's some money in the bag if you need some change. I'll pass that around to people who are not reading. And you can also give, if you're online, you can give on Venmo at BGSQD. And that will help us keep this boat afloat. So thanks very much. Before we get started, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement, and then I will introduce our first reader. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community House's Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. We also want to recognize that our own government is actively supporting the State of Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people with our tax dollars. We hope that you will join us in calling for a permanent ceasefire in order to end the collective punishment of Palestinians and to ensure the swift delivery of much needed food, water, medicine, fuel, and medical aid to the people of Gaza. So our first reader, fresh from last night's reading, Gerard Cabrera, is from Springfield, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the first American dictionary, Dr. Seuss, and basketball. His debut novel, Homo Novus, was published in October 2022 by Rattling Good Yarns Press and was supported by the Breadloaf Writers Conference and a Breadloaf Bakeless Foundation Fellowship at the Camargo Foundation in Cassis, France. Other writing has appeared in Gay Community News, Accentos Review, Angel Rust, Apricity, Jonathan, Quelly, and Digging Press. An attorney, he lives and works in New York City. Visit him at gerardcabrera.com. Please welcome Gerard.
Thank you, Donnie, and thank you, the Bureau. Good afternoon.
I'm Greg, the other Donnie.
The other Donnie. Donnie is not here, but Greg is here. Thank you for hosting this event, and a special thanks to the Publishing Triangle for sponsoring it as part of the Outspoken series. I'm a new board member of the Publishing Triangle, and I'm really excited to be part of this collaboration and to be here with everyone today. And you too can be a part of the Publishing Triangle by joining. Membership is only $40, so you can go to the website and you can join today. Today's event is actually the second time we're doing it. The first time was in August at the Outright Conference, and we did it virtually. This is the first time we're doing it in person. We're presenting only a sample of the literature that sprang up and continues to grow as a response to the AIDS crisis in this country. And we hope that it will spark your appetites to delve more into this writing, not only for its literary value, but for the priceless political value that it continues to share with everyone. So I'm going to be reading a short story. Disorder under heaven, the situation is excellent. Mario's stroke had created a big revolú in Alvin's life. More than la muerte de mamá, but less than Luis. There he went again, making comparisons. Why did he have to put things in order like that? ¿Quién sufrió más, mamá o Luis? Cancer or AIDS, as if it were a competition. Look at him. Look at my man, babeando when he isn't careful. Que calentón. He pulled out a rainbow bandana to wipe his sweat, then Mario's. Mario could walk a little, but it was easier to push him in the wheelchair with all the crowds. They had met at Bear Pride in P-Town 10 years ago, thanks to Alvin's pelt. Whoever invented bears deserved to be Grand Marshal of the Stonewall people forever and ever. But sex had to be adjusted. It now had to be enough to hold Mario and listen to his heart and his strokey love talk. He knew it was love talk from the tone, and sometimes he could make out a few words. There were rehab and PT and OT and pills to be managed, appointments and finding parking, ramps, elevators, grab bars, bath mats, homemades, machines. Where was the fun? No one could tell him. He thought he had paid his dues. Did he deserve to go through this all over again? He felt shitty thinking this way. But what did deserving have to do with it? He should concentrate on the good times they had shared together, not even planned, just happening, whenever. He supposed it was good to live that way. Did Mario remember? He tried to ask him about it a few times. Remember Montreal, Wilton Manor? A nod and assent with a head bob. What good is a memory when you can't discuss it with the person who made it with you? Alvin looked around. Too much rain and 100 degrees in the sun. Plastic in the fish they ate and plastic in the water they drank. El mundo se estaba acabando. They were the lucky ones. They didn't have a Maria to wipe them out yet. One day soon, the city would have its own disaster, and then everyone would have the same blue tarp to cover themselves and ask, why me? And how did this happen? The parade came to a stop to let the crosstown traffic through, a break from the pushing. They were on 6th, and behind them were a contingent called the Historical Marys, with big cardboard signs. History. In the past, Alvin and Mario could have been hung, stoned, castrated, beheaded, imprisoned, fired from their jobs, or be refused service in the store. All with the blessing of the church, state, and fellow citizens. But things changed. Federal funding for AIDS in 1990, sodomy laws overturned in 2003, and gay marriage in 2015. Conversion therapy and gay panic were on their way out. What was his history? In the 70s at the university, Alvin had studied political science and been a member of a Maoist independentista student group. But his love of faggotry and Luis was stronger than the macho Viva Puerto Rico Libreism of those times. And he and Luis had both left the island to join another vanguardia, Manhattan, with its bars and discotecas and delicious wildness. And he had never regretted it. But lately he had been having doubts. Ay, Mario, dark pensamientos about prognosis, about sobredosis, about using a pillow. But every time he pictured it, the whole thing seemed like a fraud. Alvin suddenly remembered a line from Manuel Ramos Otero. What's important is that our house has always had an eviction notice nailed over the door. 25 years ago, he had marched down the same avenue with Luis, defiant. Now it was 50 years of gay pride and so much time had passed, pero pa qué, just to be in the same position with straight people who were now again trying to erase him. Now he was supposedly in the same boat with the folks who hadn't cared if he was tattooed or quarantined or cured or saved. Now everybody was supposed to be equal. What did it mean? He had always believed history kept moving toward progress, in cycles, claro, but always in a forward direction. He didn't understand the times, but the parade had begun to move again. The beat, the queens, the Twinkies, bears, gender activists, otters, dykes on bikes, the tambourines, the whistles, the vuvuzelas, the scent of weed and cologne and body stank in rhythm with the drums, calling everyone to a sort of chaotic togetherness, like a symphony without a conductor, and he and Mario and their matching Marge Simpson wigs were a part of it. Thank you.
Stephen Reel is the author of 2 full-length collections of poetry, Edgemere and Fellow Oddfellow. His chapbook, Postcard from P-Town, was published as runner-up for the inaugural Robin Becker Chapbook Prize. His poems have appeared in the Minnesota Review and International Poetry Review. He edits the Franco-American Journal Resonance. Recipient of a Massachusetts Cultural Council grant, Reel was also named the 2005 Robert Fraser Distinguished Visiting Poet at Bucks County Community College. Please welcome Stephen.
Thank you, Gerard, for inviting me. It's a real honor to be part of this today. My younger brother, David, my poor younger brother, died of AIDS when he was 28 years old. This poem is called Abel Has Almost No Immune System, and it's in 4 parts. 1. The red footnote on the label of the miracle drug catches my eye. Abel's in the 33% who vomit up nearly every bite. Mom and Dad told me he sobbed on the long distance call before the catheter was tunneled between his clavicle and first rib so he could feed through his subclavian. Other clinical words collide into Eden after pancreatitis, toxoplasmosis, after Abel's insurance company couldn't drop kick him fast enough. His lover works late hours to cover their mortgage. Wouldn't you? I borrow shekels to board the shuttle to their condo. Abel lies upstairs, starving. Just levering his bony 99 pounds into the bathtub hurts us both. After another 24 hours, when anyone less gone would have moaned, I'm hungry, the feeding machine arrives. Aqua plastic box, like a vacuum cleaner, gleaming steel caddy, plastic tubes, plastic bags of almost fluorescent white nourishment. Welcome to the family. A nurse swings by to run through instructions as intricate as life. 1, interlocking joints. 2, kept sterile with alcohol wipes. 3, spill into Abel's core. Oh, that feels cool, he murmurs. This mission is a booby trap when each step must be followed to the iota to foil microbes. Is it possible to be precisely prophylactic forever and ever? And what if someone sleepy and or absent-minded stumbles through what's now second shift? How to gauge a turn for the worse? I am my brother's keeper. 2. Yes, my name is Cain, and I'm calling about Abel. Yes, I do have his patient ID. I want to see the bill the home health company submitted, the 3D pie charts accounting blazoned at board meetings to extol how much moolah was pinched by discharging failing policyholders into the land of Nod. For the criminal trial, our lawyers subpoena this quarter's financials, issue interrogatories to establish bloated profits the LLC diversified, how many day spas it spawned east of Eden, how many golf courses begat among thistle and thorn. 3, all evidence will be offered to Adonai. 4, I am the wobbly tiller in Abel's room, who paces but must keep steady. With rigid fingers, I hold the survival of my first rival, whose birth introduced me to the murderous scythe I swing inside. This vigil will last days, only hours, in fact. Unto dust thou shalt return. His sleek alarm clock sweeps silently on, while I scribble lists of specialists, lay siege to another helpline's moat. Abel has no drawbridge, 1 or 2 white cells left to rouse. 1 slip, 1 contaminated swipe. If only I could kneel beside his bed and believe. The day after my brother died, I started writing a different poem about what had just happened to each of us. Although I continued to compose poems over the decades on this topic, they arrived only sporadically and with difficulty. When it came to this subject, I felt glacial. A major reason was the complicated and deep blend of guilt I encountered when writing about my brother. I also hesitated to put some of my most private pain into words on display. A few years ago, when I mentioned this block during a poetry workshop, its leader, Kevin McClellan, suggested that I read Roland Barthes' Morning Diary. The form of that book liberated me. Like Barthes, I could record daily thoughts about my deceased family member. My musings didn't need to be poems, nor chapters, nor essays. Memories and realizations began tumbling out. Once jump-started, I've drafted over 200 pages of a memoir about David's illness and death, and I continue to write poems about him and about other men in my life who died of AIDS, men like my friend Walter Borowski. Part of my life's work consists of honoring and memorializing their lives. Thank you.
Next reader, Charles Rice Gonzalez, born in Puerto Rico and reared in the Bronx, is a writer, LGBTQ activist, co-founder of BAD, the Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance, and an assistant professor at Hostos Community College. His novel, Chulito, received recognition from the American Library Association and the National Book Critics Circle. He co-edited From Macho to Mariposa, New Gay Latino Fiction, and his play, I Just Love and Give, was published in Black Latino Queer Performance, a critical anthology. His writing's been published in nearly a dozen anthologies, including Ambientes, New Queer Latino Writing, Love, Christopher Street, a journal in GLBTQ worldmaking, and his article on culturally relevant pedagogy will appear in Teaching Black. His honors include the Lambda Literary Foundation's Dr. Betty Berzon Emerging Writer Award in 2014, an award from the New York City Council in 2016, the Mencion Award from 100 Hispanic Women in 2017, and a Gay City News Impact Award in 2017 for his activism and contributions to advancing the lives of LGBTQ people, and a Lannan Foundation Fellowship in 2018. He's the chair of the board for the Bronx Council on the Arts and the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures, and is on the advisory board of the Macondo Writers Workshop. Please welcome Charles Reisman Sullivan.
Thanks, Greg, Donnie. Thanks for being here today. I want to thank you for putting my book out and keeping the book. It's been over 10 years. I've written 2 other novels, they're just not published yet. So I'm putting feelers out. I've done the agent route, it's come dry, so I will continue my journey. With that, I'm going to read today. Last time I read from a story called Deep Salvage, which was a story that was a challenge that Feliz Pecano did to a group one time. He said, if there was a time when all we did was write about AIDS, because that was the main thing in our lives that we were thinking about when we were fighting for our lives. But many years later, what would you all write about? If I were to say, let's do a prompt, let's write about AIDS, what would you write about? And it got me to thinking that. And so I think we'll talk more later, and I'll just get to reading. But I think it's, you know, what I discovered is that sometimes it's not writing about it, it's just this part of my experience in my DNA, right? So part of my memory and part of my experience. So sometimes it appears in different ways. So I'm going to read from a short story that just came out in this journal called Versace. And it is a journal that is published out of UC Davis, and it's been around for about 10 years. And the story is called Domas and Shwaib. I often think, I'm also going to say, I'm going to skip stone through the story. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So I often think, what's the point of living a long life? We should have the right to opt out at some point, not like the craziness of sci-fi movies with plots that have a mandatory death age, but it's a decision we make. Maybe when we're 90 or when we're unable to do the things we love, or when we lose someone that we truly can go living without. We should be able to take a sleeping pill and never wake up. But I sit and wait, not for death, not today, not here. Although, as I look around, this would be a lovely place to die. I've been coming to this park my whole life. I love the lake, surrounded by tall leafy elms, wallowing weeping willows that, with the help of a soft breeze, stroke the lake's reflective surface. I look forward to watching the elms change colors in the fall, and how in the spring, the willows bloom first. But now they're all lush, relishing the early summer's embrace. A family of swans drifts lazily in my direction. They always do whenever I sit on my usual bench closest to the bank. The swans are back. What are they thinking? Viejo, what are you doing looking all dressed up? You on a date or something at your age? I shake my head. This is not a date, right? I check my watch. Is 15 minutes still the appropriate time to wait for someone to show up? I should go. Back to my chair, back to my music, back to my books. But I remember Kevin at the senior center asking me what I wanted when I turned 90 last month. To die is what I wanted to say, but that frightened me. So right on the spot, I changed my mind and said to live again. When the words left my mouth, no sabía ni un carajo lo que decía, but I thought about it. What would it mean to live again at my age, when my hips and knees still hurt me, even after my hip replacements 10 years ago, and the knee replacement 7 years ago? I can't climb stairs easily. It's a slow walk from my chair to the kitchen to make a cafecito and forget about doing the dancing that I love to do with Felo. The pain in my knees had gotten so bad, I had to stay home. I really wanted to die then, so instead I got my knees replaced. Now I can get around. I walk slowly to the park. It used to be every day, but now I come every few days. I often think, why can't I just die already? I had a perfect love with him. Then I see him coming along in a red motorized wheelchair, just like Kevin at the senior center said he would. Kevin said that Shwaib, that's his name, said the same thing I did when Kevin asked him what he wanted for on his birthday a few months ago. I want to keep living. Kevin knows our histories. Come to think of it, Kevin is the only friend I have. I think he has a grandpa crush on me. Kevin said that this person that I watched zipping along the path loved to dance, loved the beach, and loved books. He had stopped traveling too, well in planes, I suppose, because he's jetting quite quickly along the path on the other side of the lake. He's waving. I sit up. My hands are sweating. I clear my throat. I look at the swans. Hey, Seasonus, mind your own business. Look the other way. As he approaches, I steady myself with the bench's arm so I can stand. He waits for me to sit. Don't get up on my account. He parks right beside me and faces the swans. I shake his held out hand. This is a beautiful park. I haven't been here in years. He takes in the lake, the trees, and the swans, picking at the remaining pieces of bread and bits of lettuce I tossed to them earlier. I saved some for Swareeb in case he wanted to feed them. He notices the second pillow on the bench beside me. Is that for me? I suddenly feel foolish. Kevin said he got around in a wheelchair, but I forgot until the moment I saw him whizzing along the path. Yes, but I forgot that. He holds out his hand. Can you help me up? I'm not sure, but blurt, sure. With all the strength I can muster, I hoist him myself up. He raises his thick eyebrows. Are you sure? I don't want us both tumbling into the lake. Then he laughs heartily. I laugh too and along with him. Let's try, and if we fall in, the swans will save us. They're old friends. He stands and I carefully help guide him to a cushion. His hands are warm and soft. We sit quietly, and although it's only been a moment, I feel nervous and awkward. Would you like to feed them? I have some extra. I lift the bag from under the bench. Sure, I never fed swans before. He takes the bag from me. His hands are large and look youthful, with smooth, clean fingernails. The rustling of the bag calls the swans. I watch him toss out the treats. One swan catches a piece of bread as it sails in the air. Swaib lights up. Did you see that? I laugh. He's feisty. He's one of the 8 that they had this spring. Last spring, they had 5, and the spring before that, they only had 3. When the cygnets grow up, the parents kick them out. Really? You know a lot about swans. These swans, they're my friends. I feel silly repeating that. Do they have names? No, just swans. Then how could they be your friends? Friends have names. I nod. Your name's Swaib, right? Yep, and Kevin told me you're Tomas. We compare notes on what Kevin is bringing to our respective book clubs. Like, they like more sci-fi and fantasy at Swaib Center, while my center likes revisiting the classics like The Great Gatsby. What are you thinking? I shrug. I was wondering your age. Swaib smiles brightly. Are those his teeth? Tomas, does it matter? You're still walking around and I'm in a wheelchair. I shrug. I should get one of those. Changed my life, he said. After knee replacement didn't take too well, I just gave in. I weighed his words. Makes sense. Schweib nudges me. But do you want to talk about old guy stuff? Because I could talk to you about my prostate. Don't get me started. You still have one? So sexy talk. Schweib guttural laugh is full and he hunches with his when his laughter takes over. When he calms himself, he asks, got any kids, Tomas? I shake my head. He smacks his thigh. I got 3. Well, had 3. One died in the war and I'm pretty much dead to the other 2. What happened? I committed one of the greatest sins. I'm gay. Did you know that? He laughs and shakes his head. I was married at 19 to a young girl from the Gaza Strip. Our fathers went to school together. I couldn't say no. But when I set eyes on her older brother at the wedding, he shakes his head. I literally lost my breath. We shook hands and then he said, since we'll be family, and pulled me into a hug that I recall to this day. Then I kissed his cheek, and his lips must have parted because he left a small line of saliva on my cheek, and I could feel it cooling in the breeze. I raised my eyebrows. How long ago was this? Shraib harums. Are you trying to do the math of my age? He chuckles and raises his thick eyebrows. Damn, that was over 60 years ago when I was 25. What's his name? Amir, he answers quickly. Amir. He looks out at the swans that have moved away to the center of the lake. Did anything happen? That night? No, well, we kissed at the wedding. It wasn't what you might think, but at one point we were alone in the bathroom, washing our hands side by side. We're looking at one another in the mirror, and then he just leaned toward me and we kissed, long and slow. Then we parted and resumed washing our hands. That's it. That was all it was. We were taking a great risk, Schweib smiles. Right after the wedding, he went back to Gaza and I hardly saw him. Things were different in the West Bank, and after the June War, my father and I came to the US to work, save money, and then send for our families. We lived with my uncle in Chicago. He had a small chain of supermarkets. My younger brother came to work with us too. Soon after arriving in the US, I learned that Amir had come to Chicago as well. Aha, yes, so more happened. And even though it was America, it was 1968 and we were living in our Muslim community. We were very secretive, but my youngest brother caught us. Ay, Dios, no, what happened? Yes, my family had gone out. Amir and I had made love in my room. Then we were cleaning up in the bathroom when we heard a knock on the door, and my younger brother called out that he needed to pee. I ducked in the shower, and Amir stepped out and greeted my brother, who didn't think much of it at first because Amir came over frequently. I heard my brother take a piss and flushed, and I think he suspected something because he pulled back the shower curtain. What happened? Our eyes met. He just slowly closed it and left the bathroom. But another time, Amir's uncle caught us at their place. We were always careful, coordinating our time together since we were both guys. We can get away with a lot, but not sex. Shoaib chuckles. Sex. Caught you? Caught you? Shoaib nodded. His uncle suspected as much. I believe so. So Amir and I were alone. He locked his door locked, of course. Suddenly his uncle kicked open the door and we were in full fucking mode. He laughs. I can laugh now, but then I thought I'd be killed. His uncle came prepared with a bat. He swung and hit me before Amir wrestled the bat away and threatened to beat him. Amir told me to leave. I grabbed my clothes and ran. On their porch, I put my clothes on and raced home. I shook my head. Then what? It's a long story. By the time I got home, my father had been called. All my clothes and things were tossed out on the street. I collected them in a black garbage bag my little brother snuck out to me. Amir picked me up, and we went to a few nights in a hotel. We lived in Chicago at first, then moved here to New York, out to Bay Ridge before moving to the West Village. It was the 1970s, a wild and wonderful time. I watched Shoaib be quiet. Is he recalling those wild and wonderful times? He does bursts of talking, then goes quiet. As if sharing drains him, I wait, I listen to take in deep breaths. Is he remembering too much? Is forgetting better? Shoaib, where's Amir? He smiles and pats my hand. Lets it rest on mine. I expect that whatever dream state he is in, that it is a blissful one. I nod, although it sounds like a riddle. Dream state? He's passed on. Amir died in 1990. Although we'd stopped attending mosque and following the teachings of Islam the minute we left Chicago, when he died, I cleaned and wrapped his body as is done in our tradition. My brother helped me, he knew what to do. Shoaib's hand still rests on mine. I reached over with my other hand. My fellow died in 1985, AIDS. Shoaib nods knowingly. Sorry to hear, Tomas. Amir died of AIDS too. He pauses, then speaks. I sometimes wonder why I didn't die too. I should have. Amir was a steady rock and I was crazy, but I survived. My body responded to treatment, not his. So I lost my great love. His voice trails off and he shuts his eyes. I see him so clearly. I miss him still. We sit in silence, one hand resting on the other. He's probably reliving those past moments as I am. I remember my bright, robust fellow, small and sallow in his bed. I'd often climb in and lay beside him. I combed his thick hair and put cool cloths on his forehead. He was unconscious during his last days. Then, one bright afternoon, as I lay beside him, talking as I normally did, he went. The heart's machine volume was low, but I heard the steady tone. I looked up at the monitor to be sure that there was a flat line. I should have screamed or called for someone, but I held him tighter, not wanting to release him from my embrace. Eventually, I sighed, descansa, mi amor, descansa. I laid with him for a few moments before a nurse rushed in. It was Deborah who'd taken such loving care of him. She covered her mouth in a failed attempt to suppress the scream that I should have given. She quietly came over, turned off the machines, and left me with him. Shoaib places his hand over mine and gives it a squeeze. Then we separate. Shoaib, I've never told anyone about that moment, not even my mother. I don't know why. I think it's because I thought it was private, ours. But what's the point anymore? He shrugs his shoulders. Let's not bond over our past or pain. One of the last things Amir said to me was to keep living and loving. Although I'm enjoying this connection over pain in our past, I say, good advice. Thanks.
I forgot to say at the outset that we're going to do a Q&A afterwards. So if you have questions, hold on to those. So Philip Clark is our next reader. Philip is the co-editor of Invisible History, the collected poems of Walter Borowski, winner of the 2023 Tom Gunn Award for Gay Poetry. His previous books are Persistent Voices, Poetry by Writers Lost to AIDS, and In the Empire of the Air, the poems of Donald Britton. The recipient of a MacDowell Fellowship, he is completing a biography of H. Lynn Womack, a pioneering gay publisher from the late 1950s to the early 1970s. He lives near Washington, D.C. Please welcome Philip Clark.
Thanks to everyone for coming out, and thanks to the Bureau for hosting as many wonderful cultural events as they do. There certainly seems to be something going on every single time I am in New York, so much appreciated. As Greg mentioned, I'm going to be reading from Invisible History, the collected poems of Walter Borowski. Walter was a post-Stonewall poet from the Boston, Cambridge area. I edited the book with his surviving partner, the cultural critic Michael Bronski. And I'm actually going to begin with a poem that predates AIDS, a poem that Walter wrote during the 1970s. And people might wonder why I would read something that predates AIDS, given the topic of today's reading. But what I think is very important is that we not forget about the pre-AIDS gay culture, including the gay sexual culture, that AIDS really did wipe out in many ways when it came along in the 1980s. So I'm going to begin with an earlier poem by Walter that is called Surprising Kisses. You were my first S&M man. You showed me the ropes, though we had to imagine them, in the dorm at the St. Mark's Baths. Don't move one wrist from the other, you ordered. Now lick me all over. And like a tired or drunken ballet dancer, my tongue twirled, passion without form, taking your pleasure moans for applause and flowers. Now and then I'd plie at your closed mouth, lick your clipped beard and tight lips. Now and then, on cues very much your own, you'd open your mouth and give mine surprising kisses. How odd, how much more desirable these than those given freely in uncategorized love, as if kisses are just commodities, obeying the law of supply and demand. Later, you worried that my hair, wet all the while from whirlpool and sauna, steam bath and love sweat, would catch me cold. You offered me taxi fare home. Surprising concern, surprising kisses. But like men of less choreographed fantasy, you said goodbye and good knowing you. And I danced uptown unbound. That was from Walt's first collection, Sexually Dangerous Poet, which is still one of the best titles for a book of poetry ever. And the poems that I'll read now that are more directly related to AIDS and Walt's experience with AIDS are all from his second book, Lingering in a Silk Shirt, that was released in 1994, just before his passing. The first of those is called Away. I've HIV. To avoid PCP, I inhaled monthly AP until in collusion with DDI, it inflamed my pancreas, elevated my amylase. Now I begin each day with 4 25-milligram Dapsone and homemade AL-721, hopeful membrane fluidizer. On Phil Donahue on March 1st, 1990, several people, mostly white women under 45, said gay men have to be put away. In a desert, behind fences, they said that they could not possibly raise children with our images, with us around. Phil said, you mean round them up like we did the Japanese Americans during World War II or the Jews during the Holocaust? I don't care, said the woman, with the silver hoop earrings, the peasant blouse, and the ponytail. I just want them away. I've got 37 T4 cells, dear. Patience. This poem is talking to Jim. So nothing is left of your agony. Already your friends remember your service. Splendid occasion. Your final lover talks only of you. Everyone's pleased he has a new friend. Your sisters defying your will, trying to have you declared insane, adding you were trying to go straight. I remember when KS reached the tip of your nose. I'll never be ready for my close-up now, you said in the living room. No one was reaching for a camera. And finally, while Walter did chronicle what it was like living with AIDS and also living in a culture that was so AIDS-phobic and unsympathetic to the people who had the disease, he also found within himself great wells of strength in order to be able to face and to deal with his illness. the kind of strength Michael Denneny, in one of his essays on a book on Christopher Street that he released earlier this year, was really talking about when he said that the writers, the people who were writing about AIDS, showed that writers could really be having great wells of courage and be kind of leading their audience forward in understanding and in facing events that were going on around them. So this last poem, I feel, reflects that, and it's called Virus Cutting. Virus cutting me short. Yet here I am with some show tune in my head. So insistent, so splendid a lyric, I can't get back to sleep. This is a battle cry. I put a Bach tape on the bedside boombox, try to calm this hero, this warrior queen, this Long Island movie usher. My armor's a chartreuse t-shirt. My agenda, to live. They tell us repeatedly that the deadly virus is invariably fatal. Yet every morning, drugged in insomniac, queers filled with toxicity and enchantment, fire and fungus, hear their voices, then broadcast our own news. Thank you.
Okay, our final reader, Reginald Harris. Born in Annapolis, Maryland, and raised in Baltimore, poet and librarian Reginald Harris was a finalist for a Lambda Literary Award for his first book, 10 Tongues, and won the 2012 Cave Canem Northwestern University Press Poetry Prize for autogeography. A member of the National Book Critics Circle and recipient of Individual Artist Awards for Poetry and Fiction from the Maryland State Arts Council, his work has appeared in numerous journals, anthologies, and online, including Gay and Lesbian Review Worldwide, Lambda Literary Review, Black Gay Genius Answering Joseph Beam's Call, Encyclopedia of Contemporary Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Literature of the United States, The Ringing Ear, Black Poets Lean South, and The Spaces Between Us, Poetry, Prose, and Art on HIV/AIDS. He and his partner live in Brooklyn. Please welcome Reginald Harris.
Thank you, everyone. Hello. And hello, I'm so very happy to see everyone and to be here in person with my friends. Again, in this space, I'll be reading from the work of the Soto Saint. I was here for the launch of Sacred Spells, collected works from Nightboat, which was a great honor and privilege to do that. As I mentioned, and mentioning Soto is the person that published my first poem, actually, or one of my first poems in The Road Before Us, his amazing anthology of 100 gay Black poets from a long time.
Tell us the year.
No. Thank you, but no. A Soto Saint was Haitian American and a multitudinous poet, essayist, activist, HIV activist in particular, playwright, and all around fierceness in life and in art. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit. I want to read 2 poems and then an excerpt from one of his essay, thought pieces, notes, etc., called Sacred Life. This first poem is Triple Trouble, an exorcism, and it begins with 3 headlines from the New York Post. Cops lock up gay sex den. Long Island grandma dead of AIDS. Bachelors forcing sex ed on kids. Last July 4th, like every July 4th for 4 years, Nile ground ginger roots and lime rind, spooned brown sugar in a cup of Cockspur rum, he gulped. Carrying on his head all the front pages of the New York Post for the past year, all the front pages with sorry stories, all the front pages with mad headlines, which had struck and hurt his eyes. He climbed the stairs of his abandoned building on 8th Street between B and C. In the center of the cement rooftop, he heaped the papers on which he gracefully stripped. He rubbed Greek imported olive oil over his body to catch more heat. Staring straight at the sun, Niall waited to feel the voice. Staring straight at the sun, Niall waited to feel the heat. Staring straight at the sun, Niall waited till his teeth clacked with a shriek so hot it set the heat on fire. Round and round the flames he ran, talking in tongues. Then on the roof's edge, he perched in arabesque, like an eagle ready for flight. High above his head, he lifted his arms. In his fluttering fingers, the sun shattered. The universe stood still while Niall smiled, an empowering mystery. The past passed on from generations, all the joy of life reflected. So slowly his body bent forward, long supple arms opened low to pay homage, to surrender himself in prayer, to offer himself, a black queen dancing with shadows at high noon. Triple trouble that's brutal, chasing America's evil spirits away. And this poem is The March. Too young. Let us not fall like cattle to redeem America's plaguing prejudices. Let us not fall, let us. Savagely charge a country tempted by fascism. Our martyrdom is no fake slaughter, but terror is a syndrome which can act up like bleeding black bulls. Too young, let us not fall like cattle to redeem America's plaguing prejudices. Let us not fall, let us. So I mentioned in this work, there's an essay, thought piece, notes, ramblings, sort of indescribable, semi-poem almost, indescribable work called Sacred Life, Art, and AIDS. And these are sections from that. It is in our dreams that sacred life is entered. Speak for our age. Escapism is a commitment to denial. Skepticism is healthy. Cynicism is a disease. Everybody's playing it. I offer myself hope, which is the very act by which man the unfilled in himself. Hope is not the kind of optimism that resolves all contradictions by blind leap into the future. Hope is engaged in the weaving of experience now in process, or in other words, in adventure now going forward. Despair is in a certain sense the consciousness of time closed, or more exactly as still, of time as prison, while hope appears to be piercing through time. Hope is greater than despair. Richard Wright once said that if you possess enough courage to speak out what you are, you will find out that you are not alone. Denies that white racism, straight homophobia ever had the power to reduce the Black race to a traumatized martyrdom. Frying in the molten grease of defeat. Exhorts the gay and lesbian Black community to fight crime, drugs, welfare dependency, and teenage pregnancy, to shoulder responsibility, study diligently, debate reasonably, and express its political will electorally. He should write not only what he understands, but open himself up to questions and various possibilities, face the moments of our time. A writer should write not only what he understands, but also live with questions, always opening himself up to new ideas, possibilities and rebirth, revolutionary terrorists committing supreme acts of courage, will, and human power in killing indiscriminately in the belief there are no innocent people in a corrupt society. Our lives are a relentless unreality. Therefore, we must create our own reality and invite our readers and audience to enter this reality. Lost souls trapped in the American dream, rapture of spirit. That's where true creation takes place. We must go to the limits of being regardless of the consequences. We must always remember this and reassess our position as witness bearers, but also carriers of the torch of truth, which often does scorch us. Skipping ahead. Sure, I get the blues. I learned how to snap out of them. If you don't like risk, you're looking for comfort. Possibility lives in our language. One does not make possibilities by explaining, describing, or giving tips, but by declaring, by being committed. The promise lives in the word and in the action. That kind of innocence you don't trade. Unimaginable lives, dungeons of low self-esteem, archaic stereotypes, and selfish non-participation in the gay political struggle. Inhabits a land he helped to create. Most of us relegate our lives to looking good. We're rather resigned, living life in a space left after we're convinced that our lives don't make a difference. Your fear of loneliness and rejection matches theirs. An artist in the process of creating a gay Black in search of himself. Epidemiology and demographics of AIDS, HIV is disruptive. It disrupts the smooth flow of your life, living with questions, and we all want easy answers that alleviate our misery. I've kept myself alive by being open, by acknowledging the too real possibility of my dying young. AIDS is but one of the many problems we face as a society. It did not make me an activist. My therapist keeps insisting that I display anger. I'm past that. It's an overwhelming sense of mourning. It's an overwhelming sense of mourning that never eases up. Use our poems as weapons to fight for our survival. That fueled my artistic drives by its idiocy, pretense, bullshit. There are no easy answers, but at least we owe each other. But the least we owe each other is trust and honesty. Censorship does not equal silence. The one good thing about AIDS is that it doesn't discriminate. It's fear of the unknown, fear of havoc, fear of losing control. Just because I'm different doesn't mean I can't access power. I know the pain of leaving my lover on a stretcher in a hallway in an emergency room. I know the pain of watching friends deteriorate, sensing the disease acting up in my nerves, my mouth, my lips. I can sit on my terrace, look down the avenue, and see a dozen young men in 1 hour pass by, gaunt and frail, legion covered. There are days when I've laid on the floor, no strength to get up, as if the ground had a right to swallow me up right then and there. And the last thing I want to do is just an excerpt from the introduction to The Road Before Us, his anthology, which I read in DC or virtually in DC. And I'm reading it again because it's sort of prescient. May the rhythm of our gay Black hearts be as uplifting in our daily lives as it is in our essays, anthologies, films, rallies, one-night stands, and poems. May the rhetoric never rage like the grandstand of many pedantics in the gay white community, which we so often hasten to castigate for claiming to speak on behalf of our quote-unquote rainbow community. And most of all, may we come to believe in each other, heroes first to ourselves, unafraid to strike a pose and take a stand. Ours is a country where omens abound out of control. Ours is a country tempted by fascism. Ours is a country in a demythologized age, perhaps void of salvation. Yet I don't believe in the destruction of America, but in a reconstitution that recognizes our fully participating gay Black voices. Silence equals death, writing equals life, publishing equals survival. Thank you.
All right, now if all 5 readers want to come up to the stage, we'll do a Q&A.
Well, thank you all again for coming, and if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, this is the time to do it. I just wanted to comment on, again, this is the first time that we're doing this in person and how wonderful it is. And it's almost like, I don't know what else can be said after all of those readings. We covered so much ground and so many feelings and thoughts. And I had the image in my head of a snow globe, that you shake and the snow falls. It's an image that's sort of frozen in time, and you can kind of reanimate it by shaking it. And I find our readings are sort of the opposite of that in a way, because it's not frozen, it's actually coming back to life again. It's not just nostalgia for something that won't be the same anymore, but more of a revivifying and a reanimating. And I'm so moved by everything that everyone read this afternoon. So I wondered if anyone wanted to talk about how they felt this afternoon, hearing these readings and hearing each other read from their work, and if they noticed any themes or anything in common from what they heard.
It's like the teacher calls on your chair.
Break the ice.
I mean, for me, as you were even asking the question, I was thinking of like some of the ideas of like history and legacy, right? I think when we think about HIV/AIDS, we think about, it's almost like today, there's a phrase that said, they say the phrase like the pandemic into the COVID. The pandemic's over, but COVID is here to stay, right? So in a way, it's like that with AIDS, right? I think it was a moment, and it still exists, and it's still happening. And so when I was hearing the readings, there was like a little bit of memory, a little bit of future, a little bit of legacy around all of this. I think it's part of our community and our beyond the work that we do, and for many of us, it's part of our lived lives, right? Still, taking medication every single day and to stay alive and healthy. So that's what I was hearing. But then I was thinking, one of the last things in terms of Asado Singh's work, the fierceness, right? And the strength that even if you're lying on the ground, the ground claiming it has the right to swallow you, that you still can get up, that you still can be fierce, and you can still. So that idea of resilience, I think, also was one of the things that I felt. And then I think one of the last things that thinking was like almost homage in a sense, right? That we, can honor our past, and that we can, create from it, and that we can, I'm saying embrace it in a way that, that there was a time that, it was difficult to do.
There's an anthology that the poet Carolyn Forche edited called Against Forgetting, Poetry of Witness, which focuses on poetry written by people who lived through a lot of the wars and social upheavals in the 20th century. And I think that the writing surrounding AIDS, whether it is something that was done during the time period or something that is done retrospectively, is also all poetry or writing of witness. It's making certain that people who come along behind, who might not be experiencing this in their day-to-day lives, in the way that Charles was mentioning, still understand what it was that happened during the worst years of the pandemic. And I heard that in a lot of the different readings today. For example, in Charles's, where he has people reflecting on the passing of their partners and things that happened in the past as something that would be, a retrospective look. Stephen's is retrospective, but also comes out of the direct experience of watching his brother die. And then we have things like from Soto and from Walta, which are witnessing this great event that is going on, this horrifying event that's going on in the midst of it actually occurring, which is something that is rare to see and important so that people will know what it is that everyone lived through during the worst of the pandemic. Stephen,
I only want to say, add on just by saying, I think it's the thing that I got from what we just heard was the strength of voice that that Walta and Asato and some of the characters had already gone through a process of coming out and defining themselves as gay men, and yet again they were defining their strength in terms of relating to their mortality, their approaching mortality. They weren't giving up their voices. They weren't giving up their strength. And to quote Asato, I think that came through strongly.
Yeah. I want to say that it's important that we talk about these writers from the past and also talk about the AIDS period, if you will, although it's continuing. As you said, it's here but not here. Because we don't really realize how much it has formed or shaped our present. I'm, thinking, immediately of Sarah Schulman's Gentrification of the Mind, and talking about how this neighborhood and the village would not be what it is now if not for all the people that are not here, for example. And at certain point you don't think, you just sort of think, oh well, it changed and but no, there's an absence there, which I just feel on dance floor back when I was dancing, would go out, that, oh yeah, the people that I used to see are not here. They're here. I feel them, but I don't see them. So so yeah, I think it's important to remember that period, the strength and the fierceness and the resilience of the people that decided to act up, to write, to create in the face of horror, in the face of their friends dying and themselves dying, and remember that strength and use that to move forward now during times which in some ways are just as trying in a different way.
Just to follow up on what Reginald said, not only people, but also places in this neighborhood and others. If you think of the bars and the clubs and the sex clubs that were in this neighborhood along the river, that again, AIDS wiped out, that were shut down in the face of the AIDS crisis. If you think about St. Vincent's Hospital, where so many people with AIDS lived their last days, and which was such an integral part of the community, and has now, of course, been knocked down and replaced with condos for the ultra rich. There's definitely something to be thinking about with the gentrification of the neighborhood and of many neighborhoods and cities because of what happened during the AIDS crisis.
Another absence is all the books that we would be surrounded by, written by the people who, the authors who died.
And all that, and I was, often I say,
Yeah.
and the workshops, like I would have taken workshop with Melvin Dixon and several other people that, you know, we don't get a chance to. And also thinking about the history of this building, that ACT UP was in this building, and so we're having this reading here, and I just don't think back then we can imagine that this would have been happening. Right?
We're getting warmed up.
Yeah.
A theme that I noticed too is this idea of, you know, Reggie, you talked about Asoto saying he was Haitian American. This idea of what it means to be a gay American or a queer American, I think comes up in all of the work in various ways, whether it's your parents who immigrated or whether your ancestors were brought here. All of those things seem to come up again and again in all of the writing. And I just wondered if anyone had any other thoughts about that. I know, Stephen, you've done some work on this with your French-Canadian ancestry. And Soto is very, I think, articulate about being Haitian American. And in your story, you talk about coming to this country and, you know, that whole project. And I know that Walter talked about his parents and grandparents and language differences and things of that nature.
Class too.
Class, all of those things come up in all of this work. And I wondered if anybody wanted to reflect on how that informs also this kind of literature, because I think it's inseparable in a lot of ways.
I think, you know, in some ways, I think the advent of AIDS made people, particularly who were I don't know, hyphenated, maybe sort of like Haitian and American, because Asoto was born in Haitian, was Haitian and immigrated and became an American. So there's a whole question of, well, what is this country that can allow this to happen to my community, to any community? What is America? You know, and what is America's obligation to its people? And you know, I think that's a sort of a question. It sort of makes you question, well, you know, we're here, you know, land of the free, home of the brave, but what does that mean to me? Am I part of America because I'm gay, or because I'm Black, or a Nation, or, you know, speak Spanish and all, spoke Spanish, or spoke a different language other than English at home, growing up? Yeah, what is America? And what is the country's response to me, obligation to me? You know, so those are questions I think that come up in all the work.
Soto has a poem called Galians, right?
Yeah,
Gay aliens. And
yeah. Galen's Press was what he called his
Ah,
the press that he created. Yeah.
Just in relation to that, I just finished reading Walter's book yesterday. You know, Walter had already developed a lot of muscles by dealing with his working class background and his pluck and sassiness of having the working class voice come through in his poetry. He was not James Merrill. He was Walter Borowski. He came from Long Island, and he wasn't going to stop being who he was. Neither was he going to stop being the queer he was.
Yeah, I would add that his effeminacy comes through loud and clear in the poetry. It is a significant part of his character, cannot be separated when you're reading his poems.
Yeah. So by the time, you know, once he had to start writing and be out about being HIV positive, he already had this incredible strength of character that comes through in his voice. It's just a remarkable book.
Thanks.
So the answer to Americans, I would say yes and yes and yes and yes, right? I have friends, you know, that lots of different opinions, but I'd always say that. And I was like, well, no, I always am American, because there is an effort to erase me from that narrative. And so I continuously, with my queerness, with my Blackness, with my Puerto Ricanness, with my Latino-ness, with my Bronxness, I claim all of those things as this is what America is. And if you want to look at me, this you're seeing in America. And so I say that. And then, we take, Audre Lorde used the word intersectional when she was talking about it, but she was definitely always insisted to be identified with all of her identities. For that reason of the compartmentalization that sometimes when she was experiencing, I experience it. As well. Are you Black? Are you Latino? Are you this? Are you that? I'm like, I'm both. And I can feel it in my body in the way I move through the world, but sometimes the way in which the world wants to, understand me is different. So I think, when we think of all these things, I think one of the things that I feel that is this a thread from all the works is, for us developing and those people in the room, because there are writers I know in this room, right? That we, somehow found the courage to write from where we are, right? And to value our experiences and say, whether it's writing about where I come from and my queerness and bringing all those things together, that at some points we found the strength or the courage or the inspiration and the support probably to be able to write from those perspectives. And so I often say that I'm paraphrasing the quote when James Baldwin was asked, writing from poor Black perspective, and he says, "No, I thought I hit the jackpot."
Yes.
Right. That we get to write about these experiences is a privilege, right? Not a pigeonhole. So.
Great. I want to ask about your current projects. What sort of things, if you want to share, are you working on these days? Stephen?
Wait, he goes first.
I'm working on a memoir about my brother. It's very difficult to write, but I've got over 200 pages. I'm in a memoir group. And I have quite a few more parts of my series of 13 ways of looking at my effeminacy. Shirley Bassey hasn't been written yet. There's a lot to do.
So I follow that. I am in the latter stages of finishing writing a biography of a man named H. Lynn Womack. He was the poor albino son of tenant farmers in Mississippi who became a college philosophy professor and then ditched academia in 1958 in order to publish gay bodybuilding magazines. So he lived a fascinating life, fought Supreme Court cases that still have an influence today. And it's kind of a fascinating story, and I hope I can finish it and get it out there so people can read it.
That's great. I'm trying to put together a short story collection of various pieces, and hopefully this year, 2024, I'll put it together and send it out into the world and see what happens.
I'm lucky I've had like 5 short stories published in the last 2 years. So I've been trying to do those while, but I have the novel Hunts Point that is a follow-up to Chulito that's been written. I have the second novel is called Long Island Boy, and that one specifically is set in 1983, and it's about a young man who lives in Sayville but gets plucked and plopped into Fire Island, and is experiencing that just as AIDS is rising. So that's a big part of that. The character was a ghost in another story. This is the ghost story. And then currently the generative work I'm doing now are a group of stories. I'm just saying, I don't know if they're short, but they seem to get long. Shara Stoneman was my MFA teacher, by the way, and she always looks at me and says, "Charles, you're a novelist. Why you keep trying to write short stories?" And but yeah, I'm writing a group of short stories that are all based in Puerto Rico and have a connection to the Bronx. And they're all queer love stories from different time periods, with one futuristic story that's still in my brain.
That's your plays, your holiday play.
Oh, right. Los Nutcrackers, my play is happening. It opens tonight. It goes, I could have brought it's the 20th year that it's been on stage. Fernando Vieira, who's in the audience, was a director 1 year. But I love that so many people have directed it and acted in it. So that's going up tonight. And thank you for the play. I did write a play called The Happy Hour that it's about a Black gay bar in Harlem that I will be workshopping this year.
All right. Everybody else is working, so I'm taking a rest. Yeah, still writing poetry, but interestingly, and this allows us to bring up something, and I want to talk about it. There seems to be, an explosion of reissues, if you will, or people are bringing back, many figures from, what Jafari Allen there's a disco ball between, it's called The Long 1980s. So there's a Soto, Reginald Shepherd. There's a selection of Reginald Shepherd that's gonna be coming out, early next year. Some friends are working on bringing out, have been doing that for a long time, been, working on bringing out, Essex Hemphill, bring his poetry back into circulation. And actually, Philip and I, as I said, we wanted to bring up the question of, archive and also, conservatorship. Who is going to take your papers or your work after, you're gone, or even now as you're living, a lot of people sort of say, okay, let me get this junk out of my house and these manuscripts. And I think it's very important. I mean, we would not have a lot of the very important work that, is coming back, that still needs to come back, that many of us remember, if it weren't for someone that saved it, that kept it, or that the writer had made some kind of a plan ahead of time that, okay, this is going here, because I know it's a good place, it's a safe space. There are a lot of stories of, writers whose work was, and then not just gay writers, but the work was lost or thrown out, or the family thought, oh, well, this isn't, what is this mess? Let me just set it out on the sidewalk. And it's terrifying and it's shocking. So, it's very important that we think about that we all think about that, as uncomfortable as it might be, but it's important that we think about it. Think about the children. Think about the future. There will be a future. There will be people coming after us, and they need to know what we did, what's going on, and what life was like now.
To follow up on what Reggie was saying on both counts, David Groff is in the audience here. Hi, David. When David and I co-edited Persistent Voices, Poetry by Writers Lost to AIDS, which came out in 2009, 2010, at the time the book was released, there were 45 poets in it, and I think maybe 4 or 5 were in print. James Merrill, Leland Hickman just beat us to publication, a retrospective of his work, and a couple of others. I looked this up yesterday when it was World AIDS Day, and by my count now, 17 of those writers now have significant bodies of poetry in print. And I would add to what Reggie mentioned, that next year, City Lights is releasing another selection of Gil Quadros's work called My Body is Paper. So there's definitely been a surge just among poets who had AIDS or wrote about AIDS, and that material becoming available again. And another word that I would use to add to what Reggie was saying about lost work is when work gets mothballed. When an executor is incapable of kind of handling the work and knowing how to get it out there, when a family is uncomfortable about either their family member's sexuality or what they wrote about, and refuses requests to allow things to be reprinted. Certainly when we were working on Persistent Voices, it mattered whether there was an executor who could be found, for one thing, and how willing they were to allow that work to be released again and to be out again in public view. So it is very crucial that writers and artists of all stripes think very carefully about a plan for their work for after they are no longer there, to make sure that it can still be available to future generations.
Legacies, right? Are there any questions from the audience?
Hey.
Several of the writers seem to writers really seem to have like the details that were so painful, but so personal. They were kind of what brought things alive. But were these things that when you were writing them, they came out? You know, like you discovered in yourself the memories of these highly specific moments, like when Stephen was talking about the wipes, the antiseptic wipes, or when you talking about the little detail of the kiss with the saliva on the cheek, like, did these things come out while you were writing, or were they just always in your heads? And you needed to get them down?
I think both. You know, sometimes you're for me, and sometimes I have an idea and I'm writing, and sometimes I think well, let me not speak for other writers. Okay, so I'm always thinking about it, and so I feel like in a sense I'm always writing in my head, like thinking things, and then I get to the page, and then sometimes things happen in the page, right? Things happen inside of the process, like that. That line, I remember someone kissing me one time, and I was like a little repulsed by it. Oh my God, they like spit on my cheek, but then it was hot at the same time. Then I remember that I made it, so I just took that from my experience. So yeah, so sometimes, and did I plan to do that when it was happening? No, I think at that moment it happened as I was writing, right? So I think both. Sometimes I map things out and I have an idea of even language. And other times in the process of writing, something comes up.
I think in the moment I was numb. It was an emergency. I was just every day I was trying so hard to help my brother. I was scribbling things in my diary, but not necessarily thinking. I wasn't using it as a place to mine my literary career. I was trying to stay together, keep myself together. But I have gone back and looked at that and remembered things. I think some of the images are seared in my mind just because it was so traumatic.
And I'll just say, sometimes it's editing. Sometimes when you go back to it, then you put it in, right?
Other questions?
Hi there. Wonderful talk. Sometimes I wonder about the past and the future. Have we as a community gone through the worst, or are we in an era that similar to the pre-AIDS that we thought we'd gone through the worst thing in it? Do you ever think about the future?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, Reggie's, one of the last things you read that you said was prescient. I really, stuck with me. I think he was a prophet in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think when I'm working on things, I'm always thinking about the future in contrast with the past. And it doesn't always look good, but I think something that I noticed in everything that everyone presented today is that we may not have a formula or an answer, but we are all moving forward, and none of this writing is about giving up. It's all about life and affirming life, and I think that can give us the energy to create the future that we want. We have climate catastrophe looming, et cetera, an election coming up, God knows what's going to happen. But I think that if I take away anything from this work, it's that, we have to keep fighting and doing what we're doing. And I think what we're doing is pretty positive and pretty on point.
I'll just speak for Walta. I noticed it comes up multiple times in the poems how he was alert to the possibility of a Holocaust for gay people, that he was aware of the forces of the moral majority, of gay bashers, of people who wanted folks with AIDS to be dead. He was very aware of all of the social forces that were aligned against gay people, now we would say LGBT people. And I don't think that we can ignore that those forces, many of them are still out there and still feel the same way. are still aligned against LGBT people. And we see this, of course, prominently with politicians and with the kind of social things that are going on in Florida and other states around the country, repression of discussing gay people, of trying to make certain that our stories are not told. So I would say that it's worth continuing to be alert, even though are decades beyond when Walter was writing, and we like to think of history as being a progressive arc and that things are always going to be getting better and are going to be improving. There are often retrenchments. So just to be alert to what is out there and what we need to be careful about.
Can I add to Philip's comment? Because I love that you brought up the future, because we really do have to try to figure out the enemy's next move, their move after that, and the move after that, because I did not see a lot of the shit coming that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years. And I haven't had anybody say, oh, I knew they were going to do that. I haven't heard that. And I predict that in 10 to 20 years, the Christian right will say that AIDS never happened. That they will say we exaggerated the flu for great political effect. And so having these readings, keeping these books alive, passing them on to the next generation is the armor that we're going to need at that horrible point in time.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to say, I'm just gonna quickly tag on to this. There happens to be a live plan right now called Project 2025. And everybody in this room, on January 20th, 2025, will wake up a criminal. They're going to, the plan is for whatever Republican president, ideally for them, Trump, is elected, we will all wake up criminals with no civil rights. And I would posit that I'm not a writer, but I hope you guys have one more fight in you. Because we're gonna need you. We're gonna need your voices. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, I think along those lines, as long as we're going to be criminals, possibly, it's tremendously important to preserve a gay sexual culture prior to AIDS. You know, everyone thinks there was horrible culture, then there was AIDS, and then everyone's writing about joining the middle class. And I think it's terribly important to keep our own unique sexual culture alive, despite whatever anyone is going to do to us, because the seeds of our real liberation lie in that. And I'm very heartened to see that that's part of some of your current plans.
Thank you for expressing so much better than I did when I was standing at the microphone. Why I was reading that first poem that I wrote of Walter's called Surprising Kisses, that talks about a trick that he had at the bathhouse at St. Mark's Baths. Because a lot of people met friends, lovers, tricks, people they met at the gym, people they hung out with at the bars, who became friends and then became part of their community and were part of the community that helped people through the AIDS crisis, that were being there for each other and providing the kind of support that society at large was not always providing. So that is why the way that you expressed it is why I was reading that first poem. Is AIDS in many ways, and I talk about this in the introduction to the book, that there was this period where people were not writing about AIDS at all. After the introduction of protease inhibitors. And part of that was, I think, exhaustion from having been dealing with it for so many years. And part of it was that I think that many people internalized this idea of shame or guilt about the gay sexual culture that had been happening in the 70s. And I think maybe even internalized some of the right wings. This is, you know, the punishment for your sin kind of thing. And that people were sort of avoiding talking about this or kind of not wanting to talk about that culture that preceded AIDS. So thank you for, again, expressing it much better than I did at the podium or I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Other,
David?
Dave, okay.
Yeah, no, I just, yeah, there's so much. Yeah, that's one of the things about Osorno's work is he's very open about what he did, who he did it with, how they did it, where, and all, picking people up and, yeah. And all of that, which is wonderful, which is, sort of glorious. So I'm like, where is that now? If you will, I mean, and I do agree that a lot of people sort of internalized, well, we brought this on ourselves. Somehow we were too free or too open. Yeah, we need to get over that. I just got a little bit of that and I miss it, actually, that sort of freedom. The other thing I wanted to say too is that I mentioned this a few weeks ago that I thought this starting with the reaction to Barack Obama's presidency, that the world is changing. The old guard, if you will, is on the way out and doesn't want to be.
Yeah.
And there's that phrase that an animal that is most dangerous when it's wounded. And I think that's what we're suffering through. The plan has always been to basically repeal the New Deal. I mean, let's not even talk about going back to the 40s. Let's go back to the 30s, or the Gilded Age and Robber Barons and all that. Everybody loves watching the show on TV, but it was not. If you were not, Mrs. Astor, it was not really a great time. And also, I have this fascination with Reconstruction, that period after the Civil War, when Black men were allowed to vote, not women, but still there was voting. There were, African Americans in Congress, and all that was forcefully put down. True, on a national level, people sort of said, well, let the South deal with it. We're tired. The economy went sideways and we don't want to have troops in the South and all that. But it was forcefully put down. That's when the KKK is created, basically, and Jim Crow and all of that. Change is possible, but reaction is going to happen. You have to recognize that, and you have to fight. You have to be willing to fight and say, no, we are moving forward, period. And get over it or go away, do something, but we are moving forward, even in the face of the backlash, in the face of dying, I'm going to write. In the face of, dying, I'm going to paint, I'm going to create, I'm going to dance, I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to live. In the face of the possibility that I may not be here tomorrow, I'm still going to fight. I'm still going to work. And because we're here, I have to say something about Gabriel Stewart. Another thing that we've lost, but not. So bless you for this.
Thank you, God.
That's the running joke of this afternoon.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Are there any other comments?
Very quickly, I'm sorry, I meant to say this in the first round of my comment. We're having an emergency town hall here, December 17th, from 2:30 to 4:30 to educate about Project 2025 and mobilize and develop strategies to fight back. Please sign up. Stop the Coup 2025, www.stopthecoup2025.org. Please come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Buy books and hang out. Yeah, let's buy books and hang out.
You guys.